Hashing is about fun, running, drinking beer, and getting lost just enough to find your way back. But that evening in the Oleh forest, we didn't just get lost. We ran straight into something none of us could explain. It was supposed to be a normal hash trail. We met up around 4 p.m., the usual Warri Hash House Harriers crowd, all pumped and ready for a good run. The trail was set to start around 6 p.m. this time, a bit later than usual, but no one cared. We had the beers packed, jokes flying, and that high energy you always feel before a good trail. As we set off, the air was warm, and the trail led us through a few small villages before winding into the outskirts of Oleh. The bush around us grew thicker, and the excitement only built. Hashers laughed, called out to each other, and the thought of cold beer at the end of the run kept us moving. But the deeper we ran, the more the laughs started to fade. The sun dipped lower, and soon it was dark, real dark. The kind of dark where you can't see more than a few feet in front of you. The bush had grown dense, trees towering overhead, the trail narrowing. Our torches flickered on, illuminating just enough to keep moving forward. And that's when things started to feel wrong. We were deep in the Oleh forest now, an area locals call the Evil Forest, though none of us thought much of it at the time. But the air felt thick, like it was pressing in on us. The usual hash banter had quieted, replaced by the sound of our feet crunching through leaves and the occasional muttered on to keep the group together. But the trail, it was winding in ways it shouldn't. Turning back on itself, narrowing into paths we didn't recognize. By 8 p.m., we realized we were lost. Completely. "What's going on?" someone asked, the worry starting to creep in. "We've been here before," one of the hares muttered, looking around nervously. The flower markings on the ground had started to fade, as if the forest was swallowing them up. Still, we pressed on, thinking we'd find our way out if we just kept moving. But the deeper we went, the more the forest seemed to shift around us. Twisting trails that led nowhere, the same trees appearing over and over. It was like we were running in circles. Then we saw her. Out of nowhere, an old woman stepped onto the path. She was bent over, her face hidden by the shadows of the trees, her skin pale and wrinkled. She wasn't like any villager we'd passed earlier. No, this was different. Her presence sent a shiver down my spine. She was barefoot, wearing an old, tattered wrapper, and her hair was thin and gray, hanging limply over her shoulders. At first, no one spoke. We just stood there, frozen, staring at her. She didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there watching us with eyes that seemed too old to belong to anyone still living. One of the hashers, bigger twerk, stepped forward, trying to make light of the situation. "Good evening, Mama. We are just passing through." His voice was shaky, though he tried to hide it. The old woman didn't respond right away. She just looked at each of us, her gaze lingering a little too long on each hasher, as if she could see right into us. Then, in a voice that sounded too strong for someone her age, she said, "This is not a place for you." We all stood there, silent, the weight of her words sinking in. "We're just lost, Mama," I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We came for the run and the beer." At that, her face softened, just a little. "Your hearts are good. But this forest is not." There was something in the way she said it, something final, like a warning. She didn't wait for us to respond. Instead, she raised her hand, pointing deeper into the forest. "Follow the path I show you. Do not stray." We didn't argue. There was something about her, something ancient, powerful, that made it impossible to question. We followed her direction, our hearts pounding as we moved in silence. The trail she pointed to wasn't marked by flower or familiar landmarks. It felt different, like it wasn't really part of the forest at all. For hours, we walked, the trees parting just enough to let us pass. The old woman had disappeared behind us, and all we had was her final instruction, "Do not stray." It was nearly midnight by the time we finally broke through the trees and found the village again. The relief was instant, but no one cheered, no one cracked jokes. The night had left something with us, an understanding that we'd been too close to something we weren't meant to find. Back at the circle, Enter a nice day tried to laugh it off, popping a beer and saying, "Thank God no one got hurt." But the laughter didn't stick. There was something in the air, something unspoken. The trail had started at 6 p.m., and we didn't make it out until midnight. 6 hours in that cursed forest. I still don't know what we saw that night, who or what the old woman was. But one thing was clear, we weren't supposed to be there. And the only reason we made it out was because we weren't there to harm anything. We were just hashers, running for the beer.